town is full of witches. They're everywhere. She's a witch. I see her flying at night when I'm trying to sleep. She flies around the room and then she comes down and she pinches me. She bites me. She tried to make me ride in the devil's boat. I know that he is a witch. Oh, I'm going to have one of my fits. And they all must hang. In Boston, it was a crazy time. It was a crazy time in American history. Oh, they wouldn't know a witch if she bit him on the ear. 1692, Salem, Massachusetts was much like the United States is today. There were two families that were the richest families in Salem, and they ruled the roost. There were the conservatives who lived in town and the more liberals who lived outside of town. The conservative sect of the Puritans who lived in Salem believed that they were the elect people. Everyone else was doomed to damnation. The Puritans who lived outside of town believed that people could be forgiven for their sins. This wasn't going over well because the people that lived inside of town, the more conservative group, wanted everyone to stay together. The conservative group hired a Reverend Samuel Parrish to come and whip the people into shape, and basically he was just like our politicians today. He would do whatever they told him to do. He had failed businesses before. He had come from Barbados, where he had farmed, and he had failed. So he was here to prove something, to prove that he could do it. And he brought with him his family, his daughter Betty, little 9-year-old, his niece Abigail, who was homeless, his wife, and Tituba, the Barbados slave. She is where this all started. Just like the little girls of today, Reverend Parrish's girls were tired of being good. And they began to experiment with things that they should not have experimented with. One of the things they would do was take a bowl, break an egg into it, stir it, and the yolk would tell them who they were going to marry, what kind of job he would have, if he would be a good man. They learned this from Tituba. Tituba knew many spells from Barbados, and the children loved it. They would go out into the woods at night and dance and sway and have a fire and pretend that they were doing very, very evil things. Well, there's always one girl that wants to tell everything that happened at the slumber party. And that's what happened in this case. They began to tell. They would say, I'm going to tell on you. I'm going to tell on you. Little Betty Parrish became so afraid that she was going to be told on. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't sleep. Every time the Lord's Prayer was sung in church, she would howl. She would be stoic, not move. She would sleep for days and days. Her parents prayed and prayed and prayed over her, but she would never come to. She was never quite right. So Reverend Parrish went to go get help and speak to another minister and see what he should do. And then he was going to go talk to the town doctor and see what he should do, and left little Betty in the care of Tituba. When Mary Sibley, the neighbor, heard that little Betty was sick, she tried to help, and she came over to help Tituba. And she said, let's have the girls pee in some flour. We'll mix it up. We'll feed it to the dogs. And then the dogs will die. Or the dogs will kill the witch inside. Well, we all know dogs can eat anything. So that didn't help. It didn't help at all. In fact, the dogs lapped it up. But Betty became worse and worse. The doctor came and said, "This milady is something more evil. This is witchcraft, and you need to find out who has put a spell on Betty." Not long after Betty became sick, the other girls became sick. Her cousin Abigail started rocking and moaning and aching and making contortions with her body. And then when news got out about her, the other girls, the same thing. They were dropping like flies all over the place. One day, Samuel Parrish, the Reverend, became so upset he shook his daughter Betty. And he said, "Betty, tell me, please, who has inflicted you? Who?" And she said, "Tituba, Tituba." She was a slave. She was black. No matter what she said, she was going to get it. She was very smart and cunning, too. So she said, "Yes, I am a witch. And I know all the witches in this town. Every one of them. And if you kill me, you'll never know who they are." But Tituba said, "I'm not a bad witch. I'm a good witch. I only do good spells, but I can fly. I can fly up in the sky at night. I can sneak into your room at night. I learned all of this from my mistress in Barbados. And I can help you. I'll be happy to help you." And Tituba began naming other people in town and said, "They're witches. They're witches. And they're witches." Anything to keep the spotlight off of her. During her questioning, Tituba agreed with the girls that Sarah Osborne was a witch. She said she had 2 heads. She had wings and claws, and she would come in the night. She would come and scare the girls. Well, everyone believed it because Sarah Osborne hadn't been to church for a long, long time because she had been sick. And when Sarah was brought before the court, she begged and pleaded and said, "I'm not a witch. I can't come to church. I've been sick." They didn't believe her. They never believed her. She was thrown into jail, and in jail she died. Sarah Good was the daughter of a wealthy tavern owner at one time. However, her father used to let slaves come in and buy alcohol. That was a no-no in the Puritan book. Well, Sarah's father died. She became pregnant. No one knew exactly who her husband was. That was another no-no in the Puritan book. Sarah became so poor that she and her daughter would have to go begging door to door, door to door. Well, because that was unacceptable, she was named as a witch. And her daughter was named as a witch, and she was but a child. And they were both thrown into jail. When Sarah Good was brought into court, she said over and over, "I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch. I don't go to church. I don't have the proper clothing. I have to go door to door. I'm starving, and so is my daughter." But they didn't believe her, so trying to save herself, she said, "Tituba is the witch, and Sarah Osborne. Do you see?" As each person tried to save themselves, they'd throw someone else under the bus. Everyone was accusing everyone in order to save themselves. One time when the girls were out in the woods doing one of their ceremonies around the fire, the most respected woman in town, Rebecca Nurse, saw them. She ran up to them and said, "Stop this evilness right now. Stop it, or you will all go to hell and I will tell your parents. So it was no surprise. It was no surprise that she was accused of being a witch, even though everyone in the community knew that Rebecca Nurse was the most upstanding woman in the entire community. They stripped her in front of the court. They looked for things on her body that would show that she was a witch, yet they found nothing. She denied all of it and was found not guilty. However, once she was found not guilty, the girls began to rock and moan and cry and scream and carry on and carry on. Everyone became so afraid. That must have meant that Rebecca Nurse was guilty. Guilty. Rebecca Nurse and Sarah Osborne were hung together on July 19th, 1692. John and Elizabeth Proctor were very, very respected people in their community. But it wasn't long before their servant girl, Mary Warren, began saying that they were both witches. And she would moan and she would cry and she would not eat. Well, John got a hold of her and he said, "You knock it off or I will beat the witch out of you." It was amazing when all of a sudden the witch came right off of Mary Warren. That is until John went out of town on business. And then Mary Warren became sick again and started accusing his wife. His wife was still a witch. It turned out Elizabeth Proctor was with child. Her life was spared for the time being until she had her child. John Proctor, however, was hung August 19th, 1692. See, here was the thing. If you went before the court and admitted that you were a witch, your life would be spared. If you admitted it, public humiliation was worse, far worse than being a witch. And you could ask for redemption. But these people were Puritans. They were religious people. They weren't going to admit to being witches. They would rather die. So many of them did die, such as in the case of Giles and his wife Martha Corey. Giles, however, decided this was craziness and he had had enough of it. He had had enough of it. There was nothing left to live for. So he went before the court and said, "I am not a witch." They didn't believe him. They begged him, "Tell us that you're a witch. Tell us you're a witch and we will spare your life." Giles quit talking. He wouldn't talk at all. He wouldn't admit it, nor would he deny it. So he was taken outside. A board was put across his chest as he lay on the hard ground. Rocks would be put on his chest, and they would ask, "Are you or are you not a witch?" And Giles would say, "Put another rock on." The Salem Witch trials went on for a year. For a year, and during that time, 25 people died. 5 people died in jail, 19 people were hung, and 1 was crushed to death. Giles Corey. Now you may say, what stopped this hysteria? What made things come to an end? It wasn't until the governor's own wife was accused of being a witch that he put an end to this. He let it go on and on and on and left it in the hands of the people until his own wife was accused. Then he came to Salem and put a stop to it. Everyone that was in jail was let go. But by that time it was too late. So much death, so much destruction. accusations, reputations ruined, families ruined, all because of hysterical children who were not disciplined, who were afraid they were going to get in trouble, whose parents were taking out their vengeance on neighbors by accusing each other. After the trials, the governor put an end to any written document that talked about the witch trials. Censorship sounds familiar, don't you think? He would no longer let anyone speak on it or print any documents about it. Now, do you think that this could never happen again in the United States? Well, it has happened again.